Hi, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, author of Wide for the Win and the Canadian Werewolf series, and you are listening to the Unfreaking Believable podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Unfreaking Believable. We invite you to pull up a chair, relax, and join in for the next 40 minutes or so as we bring you guests who will share with you the moments that have made a difference in their lives. And it's all because of that one inciting incident. We believe that life is infinitely stranger than fiction, stranger than anything the mind can invent. You might even say it's unfreaking believable. Welcome to the podcast. We're your hosts, and I'm Jenny.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Betsy. How's everybody doing today?
Excited for today's interview.
I'm cold.
Yeah.
I am loving being cold. I don't get to be
Yeah.
cold very often. So
I'm sure our guest is probably colder than I am, but it is just freaking cold here.
Yeah.
It was
Well, I'm happy
22
to
this
send
morning.
you some.
No more. Your weather's in my yard. Come and get it.
What do we have for temperatures where we're at, ladies? Last night for me, it got down to -1.
It was 17 this morning and it got up to about 30.
It was the low was 38 in Wesley Chapel.
Wow. That's
So,
cold
yeah.
for Florida. So yeah.
I'll tell you what though, I really, really, really want to drive about 7 hours north where it is currently snowing in Pensacola.
Well, if you're going to drive that far, you might as well come to Arkansas because it's plenty cold here and
Very
we had a
tempting.
little snow.
How much farther
Very
would it
tempting.
take for her to get there from there, Bets?
I haven't done the math.
10
But I
hours.
could, yeah, it's probably
Yeah.
about 10 hours. It's a drive.
Yeah, I'm jelly,
Yeah.
though. I wish you guys were in driving distance. I'm all the way up here in the Northeast by myself.
Well, it's an hour to the airport, so, I mean, I come get you. Just say when. I just don't have a guest room at the moment, so,
Right.
you'd be sleeping on the floor.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I will say this is the first episode recording from the new house.
Yeah, yay.
So,
Very exciting.
Yeah.
I see an actual office behind you.
well, you see an actual mess behind me, but it functions, and that was the important thing, so
Yes.
I had to get it ready for today.
But it's nice that you're there now. The move is all over. The house is sold. It's got to feel good.
Yeah, I'll be happy when it closes. I still have my fingers crossed.
Yes,
Until it
we will
closes,
cross for you, too.
nothing is done. So, yeah, everybody say a prayer. By the middle of
Yep.
April, or not middle of April, by the middle of February, we should have everything finalized. So, fingers crossed.
Right on. Jen, you got a word of the day for us today?
I do. And it's one that I think everyone can probably relate to. We've all experienced this. And so the word of the day is scopaesthesia.
Scopus-
Ooh, scopaesthesia.
Scopaesthesia.
I almost want that to be listerinesthesia.
Scopaesthesia is the feeling that someone is watching you.
Oh, there's a song for that, I'm sure.
Ooh, I have had that.
Yeah, so that one's a very useful word, I think, except that no one will know what you're talking about unless they
Yeah.
listen to our show. So
They
there's
might
that.
think it's mouthwash like Betsy.
Exactly. But it's another reason for him to listen to the show.
How about some fun facts, Jenny?
All right, I have 2 fun facts for you today. I've got one quick one and one that's a little bit longer. All right, here's my quick one. 45 years ago in 1980, the world's population was 4 billion. So if you're over 45 years old, the world's population has doubled in your lifetime.
Unfreaking believable.
Exactly.
Yeah, I also feel called out.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I'm wounded.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I think I was 8 in 1980. All right, here's my next fun fact for us. A day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. So, a day on Venus, the time it takes for the planet to complete one full rotation on its axis is 243 Earth days, while a year on Venus, the time it takes to orbit the sun, is 225 Earth days. And additionally, Venus rotates in the opposite direction of its orbit, known as retrograde rotation. So if you stood on Venus, the sun would appear to rise in the west and set in the east. And here's a bonus fun fact for our Game of Thrones fans. If Khaleesi were on Venus, she would get her Khal Drogo back. If you know, you know.
But she'd also
Oh.
fry.
There's that.
No, she's
There's
the mother
that.
dragon. She can't be
Mother dragon,
burnt.
she doesn't burn. What am I
She's
thinking?
the
Of course.
burnt.
Anybody else would be fried. If you were standing on
Yes.
Venus, yeah.
I don't
And
think Khal Drogo would do too well
no, he
on
wouldn't.
Venus. So there's
Yeah.
that. There's that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, is everybody ready to get started?
I think so. How about Jenny, you announce our wonderful first official guest of 2025.
Yes, this is so exciting. All right, so this episode is my pick, so I get to introduce our guest. And this week we have my friend, Mark Leslie, also known as Mark Leslie Lefebvre. He is a Canadian author and professional bookseller with over 30 years of experience in writing, publishing, and bookselling. Known for his work in horror and speculative fiction, he has published books like One Hand Screaming, I, Death, Invasion, and several anthologies. He's also co-authored paranormal books like Haunted Hamilton and Spooky Sudbury. Mark's career spans many roles, including being the director of self-publishing and author relations for Kobo, where he created the Kobo Life Writing platform. He also works with Draft to Digital, Stark Publishing, and remains deeply involved in the book industry. A passionate storyteller and self-proclaimed book nerd, Mark has edited fiction anthologies and spoken at events worldwide about digital publishing opportunities. In addition to his fiction, he writes humorous and spooky books like his Canadian Werewolf series. Mark also enjoys sharing dad jokes and often travels with his life-size skeleton, Barnaby Bones. Mark, welcome to the show.
It is great to be here. I'm honored. Thank you so much, Jen.
We are excited to have you
Barnaby Bones.
here.
That's
Yes,
great.
Barnaby Bones.
I'm a fan already. Dad jokes and everything.
Yeah, sometimes it's hanging behind me on the wall, and I know this is audio only, so no one's going to see it anyways. The fact that he's outside in the snow right now means nothing.
And I have seen the pictures.
So, Mark, we are super excited to have you join us today. It sounds like you are involved in literally every facet of anything vaguely related to books.
Kind of, yeah. That's kind of my life. My life has been books since I was very little, and it has remained my life. And that partially that's unfreaking believable that I am so lucky that I get to do that. Yeah, it's truly a dream come true that I get to live this. I mean, come on, I live books. That's what I do.
I imagine that a lot of our listeners could not imagine a greater way to spend all your time than to be surrounded by books in every facet.
Yeah, it truly is. I mean, I knew from the moment I was a child. I remember, Jenny had mentioned the inciting incident, and I was trying to think of what mine was, and I really think the inciting incident in my life, for my unfreaking believable life that I've had, is I knew I wanted to be a writer and a storyteller. I remember telling my mom when I was rather young, speaking of 1980. I say, I want to be a writer. And my mom said something because she was very pragmatic. And she said, well, if you want to be a writer, then you better have a good job. And so I took that to heart. I got a degree in English, which meant I was going to probably be destined to work retail for most of my life. But I got a job in the book industry. And that has made a significant difference because the very first year, after years of rejection, I got my very first rejection in 1984. My very first story was published in 92. 92 was the year I graduated from university, and I started working part-time as a bookseller. And I have never looked back because I've been able to grow my career both as a writer on the one side and as a bookseller or a book industry representative and consultant now on the other. And I think that is unfreaking believable. And I owe it to my mom. My mom for giving me that pragmatic advice. Get a good job. Find yourself if you want a kid. And I mean, it's mostly true. Most writers are not going to make a lot of money, and I don't say that to be depressing or anything, try to be negative. I just know that it's really, really hard. It's not like there's way easier ways to make money. Go down to McDonald's and make more money, guaranteed. I don't have any marketing dollars on it either.
I think any of us who had a mom who was that supportive voice of encouragement should really stop and just say again, thank you, Mom, because my mom was the same way. She said, honey, if there's a book out there you want to read that you can't find, that means you have to write it and get you a good day job. And then you can go fall back on writing as your bonus time. And it's been a blessing for me. My mom's always been my biggest fan, so shout out to
Shout
moms.
out to your mom and shout out to all our moms. What that is awesome.
Mark, we have a lot that we can unpack with what your career expands here. But one of the things that always surprises me is when I talk to other writers, because I'm new to the industry, everybody knows I've only been doing this for about 3 years now, is it blows my mind when I hear people going to vanity presses. So if you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing a little bit about Draft to Digital and maybe what you do there?
Yeah, so I left full-time employment back in 2017 because I started finally to make enough money as a writer that I didn't need to work full-time anymore. And I was getting tired of the commute into the office and working 80 hours a week. I wanted to work less. So I started I didn't make it a full year, right? And here's the challenge. When I had all the time in the world to write, I didn't. I watched cat videos online and I sat on the couch and ate bonbons instead of doing anything productive. But I still was going to industry conferences and stuff because I'd been in the industry for a long time. And I connected with the folks at Draft to Digital, and I took on a part-time role with them as a consultant because I am Canadian, so they can't actually technically hire me. It's just weird laws with Canada and the US and stuff like that. So I'm a consultant for them. I work 20 hours a week, and that was a really pivotal moment for me because I got to work with really smart people, but then I got to have 20 hours a week to write and consult and do my other things. Now, Draft to Digital is a company that provides free tools and resources that allow authors who want to indie publish or self-publish to get that book turned into an ebook or a print book through free tools and distributed to a variety, most of the major retailers and a ton of library platforms. And you have choice. You can choose to say, I'd rather publish directly to Amazon, for example, and I use Draft to Digital to get into some of the other retailers. And one of the things I've always loved about Draft to Digital, and I did meet the folks from Draft to Digital when I worked at Kobo years earlier, was Draft to Digital only makes money when the authors make money because all the tools are free. And then they just keep a small percentage. It works out to be about 10% of your margin. And so Draft to Digital is kind of invested in authors making money because when authors make money, that's how they succeed. So the integrity was really important. And Jenny, you mentioned vanity publishing. And vanity publishing are a lot of companies. My wife and I were talking about that at dinner tonight, where they can spend millions of dollars on advertising because she was talking about ads she kept seeing come up because she was having conversations with some people at her school who wanted to write, and all of a sudden, because they're always listening, these ads started popping up for like, is this company, is this, I mean, yeah, that's a scam company they're going to charge you $15,000 to publish a book, and they're going to try and trick you on all these marketing packages. There is a benefit to vanity publishing is that the author doesn't have to worry. Right? It's like, here's $15,000. You get the editor, you get the cover designer, you do all the work. You're never going to make any money on it, but you at least get your book published. And for some people, I'm not going to judge. For some people, that's all they want. And God bless them.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys know how hard it is. It's not easy.
No.
For sure.
So, I mean, I still remember, I mean, I'm sorry, every single new book that I published, it never gets old. It never gets old. When you see that little baby and you hold it in your hands and you want to cuddle it and stuff.
I do want to point out for our listeners, Kobo is essentially Canada's version of Kindle.
Yeah, it's very nice and apologetic. Yeah, and you get free
Yes.
poutine and maple syrup when you publish
I'm
them.
still waiting on my poutine, but I actually do pretty well on Kobo because I watch those numbers come in. And yeah, thank you, Canada. I appreciate that.
And I actually do use Draft to Digital for my independently published books, and I've had a pretty good experience with them. I absolutely can't complain. And once I learned how to use the tools, which are a little different from the KDP tools, but once you sort of learn to use the tools, you can turn out a great looking, very professional looking product. That just it does show up on Amazon, even if you publish through Draft to Digital. It still pops up on Amazon too. So
Yeah.
definitely.
I think the one that I was the most excited was to see it at Target. You
Mhm.
can order my books off of Target. because Draft to
Yeah.
Digital put them there.
Target has, well, they did have an ebook partnership with Kobo. So Kobo partners with a lot of different retailers. And I know Target gets a feed from Ingram print on demand. So you can also see the listings there. But I think
Yeah, love
JB
that.
mentioned, which I think is really important to call out, and this is something I've done, is I have worked with numerous traditional publishers as well as self-published. And I think what I love about the world we're in, I've just signed another contract with a small Canadian publisher for a book that's going to be published in 2026. And I can do both. I can work with publishers and I can self-publish. And there's different
Absolutely.
goals, right? I mean, it's interesting for depending on what I want to do. I have that choice as an author, and I love that I can do both. And you don't just need to push yourself into one little corner. You can actually take advantage of so many opportunities. When I started, well, I had a typewriter to send my stories out, and mail was the only option. And there wasn't really a self-publishing opportunity back then, unless you wanted to staple some stuff together and go sell it on the corner.
Mark, why don't you tell our listeners about a lot of the things you write, like especially I love your Canadian Werewolf series, but
Oh,
please tell our listeners what you do.
Yeah, so I've always been passionate about speculative fiction, and I've always gravitated to horror, because when people say, well, science fiction, no, I don't know anything about science, so I'm not smart enough to write that. And fantasy, well, I don't really do the Tolkien epic fantasy kind of stuff. So my Canadian Werewolf series, which starts with a Canadian Werewolf in New York, is really just my attempt to be a little bit funny and look at the reality of what it might be like to turn into a wolf every course of the full moon at night for 10 days of the month, and living in a city like New York. And I was looking at the practicalities of it. I was like, well, where would you go in a city like that, a metropolitan area? You got like Central Park and stuff like that. And where would you find clothes when you wake up with no memory of what you did running around as a wolf howling at the moon? Like, where would you find clothes? So you'd have to have a place you would store your clothes. But what if a homeless person stole your clothes? Remember, you found that, look, right, clothes. So I put this guy in a really weird situation. And the opening scene is he wakes up naked in Battery Park, which is really far away from where he kind of went to sleep and turned into a wolf. He's got a bullet in his leg and the taste of blood in his mouth. And he says, well, what the heck did I do last night? And oh my God, where am I going to find some clothes?
What a
And
great
so
opening.
Yeah.
yeah, dark, humorous situation.
I love
I love
Michael.
doing that to Michael Andrews, my Canadian Werewolf. I love throwing him into situations and seeing, well, how is he going to get out of this one?
I tell you, Mark, I was hooked from the pink panties. I could not stop laughing. And
Oh, the disposable, the panties he found, the soiled panties that he found, that he's like, well, I guess I'm going to put them on. Yes, yeah, I was just trying to imagine, like, what would I do in a situation like that? Well, at least it's clothing.
yeah, it covers the private bits.
Yeah, it barely covers things, but yes, here we go.
And they read so fast, because what I love is when you finish a chapter and you flip the page, the moment you read the chapter header, you have to read the chapter.
Yeah, yeah, and I really love, one of my favorite scenes is when he's bartering with a bag lady, because she's got this cart filled with clothes, and he's like, okay, what am I going to trade for you? And he's kind of like, come on, lady, I don't have much on me. You know?
Well, all I can think of is, if he's running around in nothing but a pair of underwear in New York City, I just have to hope that somehow he was confused for the naked cowboy at some point.
Yes, but potentially, yeah. He didn't get near Times Square where the naked cowboy is, and I don't think he's a singer. So, but again, like you always wonder, like in a big city like that, there's going to be some people dressed differently, right?
Yeah,
So,
seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From my last trip to New York, I can tell you that that's probably the least shocking thing you will see. I was working at the World Trade Center after the bombing, and we were at the Tribeca Grand, and they were still, hosting the evening cocktail hour, which would last until I'm leaving to go to work. And there was a gentleman in a silver cocktail dress that looked like George Carlin in full
oh
makeup.
wow,
And I will never forget that as long as I live. And he was gorgeous.
was he as funny as George Carlin? That's what I want to know.
I didn't get to
No.
talk to him, but he was like, going to work. I'm like, coming home from work? He's like, no. It was funny.
Oh man,
It was really
Now,
funny.
Mark, aren't two of your books based locally on where you're from?
yeah. So, haunted Hamilton, Ontario, Canada's steel town. Sudbury, Ontario, the nickel capital of the world, where a lot of those the things get pulled out of the ground. That's where I grew up. Creepy capital, which is Ottawa, our nation's capital. And I've never lived in Montreal, but Montreal, Quebec was also one of the locations. The other books I've done are Tomes of Terror, which is haunted bookstores and libraries, because I kind of live in bookstores and libraries, and haunted hospitals, because I was born in one, and I've been to a hospital many times in my life.
I have some friends from Canada. Shout out to all my hockey playing friends that are from Asbestos, Laval, and all those other wonderful towns. I actually played ice hockey in Oklahoma for about 10 years, believe it or not.
Cool.
So I know quite a few hockey players from there, and it's always nice to hear them when they're out and about.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, and I'll just throw in I have a house divided here, or a personal sense divided, because I'm from Tampa Bay area. So obviously I love the Lightning, even though I'm pretty sure everybody else hates us. At least that's how it always sounds when we watch the games. But I also love the Sabres because I'm from Buffalo originally, which makes me almost Canadian.
Oh
So
yeah, Sabres are just so close to the border here.
I've been told I'm an honorary Canadian.
Well, you know what? Most of the American hockey teams are filled with the best players are Canadian anyway, so they're practically Canadian, all of them.
For sure. So, what are some lessons? I know you do a lot of coaching for writers and some consulting and stuff like
Yeah.
that. What do you think are some of the most important lessons an author needs to understand when they start their writing career so that they can be successful?
I honestly think I know there's a lot of different bits of advice. The thing I'd like to talk to writers about is the reality of the publishing world, whether you're traditional publishing or self-publishing, is it is hard. It is a lot of uphill work and stuff. So you may as well write the book that's in your heart. Like your mother said, Betsy, is the book that you want to read, write that one. And that is such great advice, because there is no guarantee that after all this work, whether you get an agent and a publisher and it gets published and stuff like that, most books are not going to sell a lot of copies. But the important thing is, those people who pick up those copies, your book may change their life. The story you share, that unique perspective that you have that no one else has, when you write, you're connecting with somebody else in one of the most intimate ways possible. And that's what I love about the magic of books and storytelling and writing and reading and all of those things. So the other thing you can do is, it may only be a small number of people who've read your work, and in your work, they see something that they resonate with. They see maybe themselves, they see elements of things that they're passionate about, and you've made that beautiful connection, and you've changed their lives from the better. You may never hear about them. And that's one of the reasons why I say it's a lot of hard work. If you're going to spend all this time and energy on it, it may as well be something that you love doing so much that the process itself of writing and creating it and getting it into the world, that you win by doing that, and everything else is gravy. If you like gravy, if you don't like gravy, then everything else is cotton
Who doesn't
candy,
like
or
gravy?
whatever it is that you
That's
like.
why poutine is so
Yeah,
good.
craft beer, whatever, right?
All right, Mark, I am sure our listeners are eager to hear why we brought you on the show. And that is for us, or for you to tell us your unfrickin' believable story. So we're going to hand the mic over to you.
Yeah, so this is difficult for me, Jenny, because when you approached me, and I think you had approached me earlier, and I was like, well, I'm a fake. I haven't had anything unfreaking believable happen. I got no good stories for you. And then when I started to think about just how bloody lucky I am that I get to be a writer, and I've gotten to work in the book industry my entire adult life. My whole life is unfreaking believable. It blows my mind. When I was first starting off writing, I remember reading Writer's Digest magazine and Writer's Market and getting these books out and saying, if I could ever publish a story in Pulp House magazine, which Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith were running at the time, these big New York Times bestselling authors, if I could ever get a story into Pulp House, I'll have made it. And then I think it was 8 years ago, I was on stage with Dean and Chris, who are now good friends of mine. And I talked about a story, and Dean leaned over to me and said, "Hey, do you have the rights back to that story? I'd love to publish it in Pulp House." And it was I practically humped his leg. I was so excited. I was just like, really, like, oh my God, like, a dog with the postman kind of thing. But it was it blew my mind that it's so unfreaking believable that I'm sitting on a stage between Dean and Chris. Dean leans over to me and says that. And then 6 months later, we were at another conference together. And he goes, "Hey, I'd love you to guest edit Pulp House. I'd love you to just do whatever you want to do for one magazine. I trust you. I'm going to hand the reins over to you for a single issue." And I think about stuff like that. I think about handing Margaret Atwood a Lifetime Achievement Awards when I was president of the Canadian Booksellers Association. Being on national radio and television in that role, being interviewed in studios in Ottawa and Toronto, and just the fact that I've gotten the opportunity to travel to so many different places. I'm a judge of writers of the future alongside, I mean, international famous big name authors who I can't even hold a candle to in terms of just how amazing they are. And and practically I I get to live an unfreaking believable life. I get to hang out with people who I respect and admire and who treat me like an equal, even though imposter syndrome is strong in this one. I don't feel worthy to be doing what I do with the people I get to do it with. And I honestly, I don't wake up every single day thinking my life is unfreaking believable what I get to do, but it truly is unfreaking believable that I have the flexibility. My wife and I just became grandparents to a beautiful granddaughter who, and her youngest child who has this granddaughter lives on the west coast of Canada. And, Liz is putting in the paperwork to transfer there so she can transfer her teaching qualifications into another province. And I can just pick up and go because I work for myself. That's unfreaking believable. I'm so lucky.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. So, Mark, why don't you just kind of expand a little bit more? I'm really fascinated about handing Margaret Atwood an award. You want to talk about that just a little
Yeah,
bit?
so it was a really funny time. So I was president of the Canadian Booksellers Association, and at the annual awards ceremony, it was the opportunity. I handed her, and then the next year I handed Alice Munro a Lifetime Achievement Award as well, which is again, and it was just like, and Alice wanted to sit beside me and stuff, and I was like, but I grew up reading your stuff, now I get to hang out with you. So the cool thing, this is the fun part of the story, is I was in New York at Book Expo America. Now this was taking place in Toronto. Now Toronto and New York it's only a 45-minute flight. The flight itself is 45 minutes, but then you got to be, at the airport 2 hours early and all that stuff. But I'm in New York launching Kobo Writing Life. So this was the self-publishing platform for Kobo, and I'm there launching it at Book Expo America, which was a major deal. We had major New York Times bestselling authors, Oprah Magazine, Time Magazine, a whole bunch of Publishers Weekly, all at this massive breakfast. And that's when I started to become really good friends with Kevin J. Anderson, who's one of the guests there as well. And then I had to fly back at the end of the day, had to fly back to Toronto to get there so I could present Margaret Atwood with this award. I'm on the plane writing the speech to introduce her. And the coolest thing that I think was so amazing, and it's just evidence of just how sharp and witful she is she had done something on Twitter where she talked about bobbleheads or something like, "Oh, it should be a bobblehead Margaret Atwood doll," and then she jokingly said, "No, honey, I'm already enough of a bobblehead on my own," And so I incorporated that into my speech when I introduced her, and then so she had her acceptance speech because she knew this was coming. It was a big deal. And in her acceptance speech, she ad-libbed a response to what I said about that. Because I was talking about just how, Margaret Atwood was an author I grew up reading as a child and studying in university and all of the amazing things that she's done over the years. And then I talked about how she's on social media and she's interacting with fans and stuff like that. She's doing the stuff that the kids do as well. And it was just so amazing. And then, of course, I had to fly back because I needed to be on stage in New York the next day. And I just keep thinking, I was like, not only did I get to hand Margaret Atwood a Lifetime Achievement Award, but I got to do this weird convoluted thing where I'm flying in and out of two major cities because I was needed on stage in two different spots and in a very limited time period. And I was kind of like, it kind of felt rock starish.
Yeah, that's what it actually sounds like to me. Is it sounds like a rock star bouncing around. and let alone being able to hand out an award to somebody like that. But
Yeah.
I need clarification myself because I have so much fun once a year watching you and Liz host a big award ceremony. Now, which one is that? Because the video recordings that you guys do and the comedy,
Thank you.
it's chef's kiss.
Well, thank you. That is the Aurora Awards, which is kind of like Canada's Hugo Awards. So it's awards for Canadian science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And I think it used to be on different coasts of Canada, East Coast, West Coast, whatever, at a conference. But then during the pandemic, they needed to make it virtual, and they said, "Hey, Mark, could you host it?" Because I had the technology and I could use StreamYard to live stream it. And there I was with a tux, and in this office, Liz was seated at the desk here, looking at another laptop. She was controlling the everything around me and making me look really great. And then the second year, we brought it'd be more dynamic to have a co-host so we could play off one another. And now we're the official hosts of the Aurora Awards. And yeah, we wanted to do the Billy Crystal kind of introduction to an award ceremony. And so there's always like a 2 or 3 minute introductory video. The one year was, "Hey, Mark, we tried to get Ryan Reynolds because he's actually a cool Canadian, but well, he had something come up, so we're gonna last minute ask you." And so the scramble was me scrambling to get ready for the awards. And then the one year I had to convince Liz to be my co-host, where I had to train her in what science fiction was. So we had this rocky training montage of me trying to thrust science fiction books into her face, all different Canadian authored science fiction books. And then this last year, I was getting my master's in publishing from Western Colorado University, and then 3 days later, we flew to New York. We flew from Denver to New York, and we got married in New York. And so we recorded stuff. I was what you would call the valedictorian for the class, so we recorded me on stage pretending to get a phone call while I'm in the middle of giving my commencement speech. And then we on the Brooklyn Bridge, as we were pretending to get married, we had video of me pretending to get a phone call. And this is the guy, Cliff, who runs the Aurora Awards, because the ballots that were mailed to me were stolen by a porch pirate. And I also played the porch pirate in the video, where I'm running past office, Google office. There's all these high-tech offices here in Waterloo, Ontario, where I am. So yeah, we've had so much fun doing that because Liz and I love that comedy shtick stuff.
You guys are so good at it too. I tell you, ladies, ladies and listeners, if you get a chance, and I tell you, this is one of the things, Mark, is we need you to let our listeners know where they can find you because they need to go check out everything that you do.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. markleslie.ca. So markleslie.ca. You do not have to spell Lefebvre. And from there, you can find a link to, for example, my YouTube channel, where you can find all the Aurora Awards. And I even did just a 3-minute opening shtick video. So you can see that. As well as Liz and I did a parody video years ago called Stuck in This House Here With You, to the tune of Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Wheel.
I
that
love
was
that.
during
I love
COVID,
that.
right?
Yeah, when we
That
were
was
trapped in the
great.
house and we had nothing to do because normally the kids would be over for Easter, but it was just us and the animals, so we thought we'd make a music video.
It's good. I've seen that one too. All right, right on. All right. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for sharing your story and explaining what makes you unfreaking believable. And I'd also like to thank my two besties. And if you have enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on whatever platform you listen on. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Audible.
You can join our Unfreaking Believable Facebook group and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and X. And you can join us on Patreon for exclusive content and other perks. In fact, why not swing over there now for more with Mark Leslie Lefebvre and your favorite Unfreaking Believable ladies?
You can visit our website at www.ufbpodcast.com. And if you have an unfreaking believable story, reach out to us at ufbpodcast@gmail.com because we'd like to hear your story too.
Betsy, how about you send us out with your famous quote of the day?
All right. So my famous quote of the day comes from Amy Joy, who says, "Anyone who says writing is easy isn't doing it right."
One of my favorites.
I love that. So true. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And remember, as you go out into the world this week, don't just be awesome.
Be unfreaking believable.
See you all next time.